I joined the Navy right out of college. I was actually running a golf course when I got picked up for the what they call that, the NAVIP program, Naval Aviation Very Important Person, or something like that. Anyway, it was the commissioning process. That was in September 1977 when I went in. Got out of that in January with my commission and went to. I selected T-28s in Corpus Christi, Texas, to be the first airplane I flew instead of T-34s, which was cool. I'm really glad that I did that. I mean, when people ask me what was the first airplane I flew it, I tell them it's a T-28. They're like, "You flew a T-28 as your first airplane? Are you serious?" I mean, it was a beast of an airplane. Did that for I was about a year in Corpus Christi. Then I went up to Beeville to VT 26, I think it was, where I flew T2s. That was about 100 hours of flight time. That was another year. And then went to VT 24 and flew TA4Js. And got coming out of there, I got Phantoms West Coast. Went out to VF 121, and I had no idea at the time what kind of history I was walking into. I had no appreciation whatsoever for what VF 121 was in terms of Vietnam, in terms of Korea, and all those other things. I mean, a lot of history was completely lost on me. And as a matter of fact, this past week, Bio sent me an article about a guy that flew Panthers in Korea. Long about, I think the story was about 1950, maybe 51, and he somehow was involved in the stand-up of VF 121. I mean, so the history of that squadron was completely lost on me. So I flew Phantoms at Miramar for 4 years. Then I went back to training command as a flight instructor in TA4s at VT24. VT24, yes. And then when I got on the phone with my detailer, the question he asked me was, "What airplane, what coast?" And I said, F-14's West Coast. And so I went back to Miramar, went through the 124, VF 124, and then went over to VF2. And I flew with them for a year or two. I made one cruise with them. I got diagnosed with asthma, and I went up to Naval Postgraduate School, and then I went to Korea as my payback tour for that, and retired shortly after that at Navy Space Command in Virginia.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question before they come in, but because I've always wanted to know this, but I don't think I asked you on the original interview. Did you do a high-speed pass with the wings back past the carrier?
I think you did ask me that. I don't believe I did a supersonic pass by the carrier in F-14s. And I don't even think I did one in F-4s. I've flown by some smaller boats that have asked for flybys, and I've flown by the San Clemente Tower a couple times. That was in F-4s. F-14s, I know I flew past a couple of destroyers, but not the carrier at supersonic. No.
As you see, there's a couple of questions coming in there, John, so I'm just going to let you answer away, and hopefully we'll get some good ones in, so enjoy.
All right, sounds good. Let's see. First question here, I think. Okay, get your questions coming. Hugo, did the Mirage 5s operated by Belgium receive any kind of modernization? Oops, I don't think that's for me. During training, did you have any element that was a sticking point? If so, what did you do, or did you just stop thinking about it? I ask because I'm having problems with glider landings. Well, wow, glider landings, holy cow. I don't know if I'm good enough to advise you on that, but yeah, there were things that at one point I actually disqualified myself on my first F-14 carrier qual because my whole family was sick. Uh-oh, did I lose you? Oh, no, okay. Yeah, I got you. Right, Mike, I know you're going to go black, right? Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first F-14 carrier qual, my entire family was sick. My wife, my kids, and I forget what it was, chicken pox or something. It couldn't have been chicken pox, that's not right, but something. And I had been awake for like 3 days, uh, not feeling very well. Went out to the ship during the day. I got my day landings, no problem. And when I launched at night, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing, and I literally disqualified myself on the radio and just told the boss, "Hey, I'm going back to Miramar. I'm done," because I didn't know what I was doing. Um, and that was an interesting, what they call the Fleet Naval Aviator Evaluation Board, a FNAB or something like that. But I was concerned that I would hurt other people on the ship, and it really focused me on how to get through a hard time. Sometimes you just have to walk away from it and come back with another feeling. So that was probably the most important sticking point. I had some issues when I was dropping bombs in the Phantom. My very first bomb flight, I won in all three bets. You know, closest, uh, uh, lowest CEP, closest to the bullseye, and best first drop. And then just everything went south. I mean, for whatever reason, I couldn't figure out how to. I could barely make a bomb hit the ground. Uh, but it focuses you when you address the issue and you take it on head on and just really dig yourself in on solving the problem so that you can move on. And that's, yeah. When I started flying small airplanes, I had trouble with landings to begin with because I wasn't used to using the nose as much as you do in general aviation. So that was a sticking point for me. It took me a long time to figure out how to land a small airplane. But yeah, you come up with those problems. As long as you identify that it's a problem and it's your problem, you can probably fix it. Maybe more of a answer than you needed, but there you go. Let's see here. What's the coolest thing most people probably don't know about the F-4? Oh, wow, that's a hard one. Probably the thing that most people don't know about is that there's a thing called a pitch damper that varies the pitch authority of the stick to the stabilator. And there's a famous video of, I think it's a Sage burner flight, where an airplane literally explodes into a cloud of pieces, kills the aircrew. That was a pitch damper problem at supersonic at about 125 feet. I think they flew Sage burner at, and when it goes bad, it goes real bad. It went bad on me on a bombing run. Everything felt fine rolling in. I'm coming down a 45 degree angle, tickle the bomb, and I put a little bit of pull back on the stick, and it goes full leading edge of the stab down, and it maxed out the G meter, so it was at least 10 Gs. And I unloaded, and the backseater said, "Nope, pull it." So I pulled back again, another 10 G snap, and we slowly got it under control and flew it back to Miramar, and it really bent the airplane. So most people probably don't know that about the F-4. Let's see. Was there any envy between you guys towards the F-4E and the internal gun versus the gun pod on the F-4, USN F-4? I never had a gun pod, never carried the gun pod on our F-4s. I don't think the F-4E had an internal gun. I thought it was still a gun pod that I think went on the centerline tank. That's why they carried wing tanks. We carried a centerline tank all the time. It would have been nice to have a gun in the F-4. It was nice having it in the F-14. I love firing that thing. It was great to strafe and to air. Excuse me. But the F-4, I don't have any experience with the gun. Envy between us and the F-4Es? Not really. When we got the F-4S, that was kind of like an F-4E. It had slats and better lighting and all that. The F-4Js and F-4Ns had horrible lighting. It was really tough to fly formation at night. And the leading edge slats and the smokeless engines or low smoke engines on the F-4S were good things to have. It was additional weight, a little bit more thrust, I think. I don't remember exactly. But the F-4N is what I have most of my time in, and it was a beast, and it was analog. It wasn't digital hardly at all. Let's see. Are there any Navy jets you have wanted to fly if you had the chance? Oh, there's all sorts of airplanes that if I had the chance, I'd like to fly. Absolutely. I mean, the Vulcan would have been fun to fly. Don't have to flare much coming aboard. That's true. If you flare, that's called nose up at ramp. You don't want to do that. What is the F-4 like in DAC? Could it hold its own? If you flew the F-4 the way the F-4 wanted to be flown, you could do pretty good. There were a lot of airplanes, later generation airplanes, that could kick your ass no matter what you did. But if you flew the F-4 properly, you kept the speed up around 425, that's cornering speed. If you use the vertical because it had a good climb, it had good thrust to weight, that was the best thing you could do. You could get away from most guys, although I fought an F-105, and you want to see somebody get away, an F-105 and an F-104. Those things, they can get away from you fast. So if you fought the F-4 right, you did a good job. And if you knew you were getting beaten, you could get away. You could get away. F-15s kind of worked me over whenever I fought them, though. Let's see. Did I use the auto throttle on the F-14 during shore and Case 1 landings? I didn't use too much auto throttle. It is a nice thing to have if it's working right. In the F-14As, I just never seemed to get a good setup. I don't know if I was doing something wrong or if the system was bad. If you had throttle friction on it all, the auto throttles wouldn't work. So I used it a little bit. It was nice in the pattern during the day because all you really had to do is fly the airplane. And that really did help. It took just not having to deal with the throttles made a big difference in how nicely you could get yourself set up to land. Let's see. You ever face the F-8 Crusader? Was it really such a performer versus the Phantom? I never fought a straight F-8. We had RF-8s on the Coral Sea. I fought them a little bit, but not in any great regard. I know that I think it was no points for second place. I think that was the F-4 versus F-8 kind of scenario. I understand the F-8 was a good air-to-air airplane. I don't really have much experience with it, though. What was the fastest you had flown an F-14? Also, did you ever manually put the wings back during ACM, and under what scenario? Manual wings back. That was, excuse me. The fastest I've flown an F-14, I don't really recall, but I flew the F-14A, so it had the TF-30s, and maybe 1.4 or something like that. I don't remember if I flew a maintenance check flight where we did all of the high-speed stuff or not, but I don't really remember if it was much more than about 1.4, just a normal bug out or something. And yes, sometimes you would manually put the wings back because people, the adversary squadrons, would see the wings back and know that you're at high speed, and they thought your turn radius would be bigger. So you come in a fight with the wings back manually, but you're still down at about 325 knots. then you click them to auto, the wings come out, and you just water their eyes with the turn they aren't expecting. So I did that on occasion. Not something you would normally do, though. What are my views on the F-16? Good airplane. It's a tough airplane to fight because it's small and it's powerful and it's highly capable, and it's a good airplane. How confident were you going up against the Soviet types? Any other types that really had you worried? During my time, they were making the transition to the fourth, fifth generation airplanes, and they were capable. The bogies in my day were still MiG-21s primarily, and of course the bombers and Bisons and Badgers and Bears, oh my, all that kind of stuff. Did I worry about them? No, I thought our training was far superior, and I look back at the history of that. What transpired between Korea and Vietnam. I've gotten more aware of where Top Gun came from and the Alt report and all the things that became Top Gun. And it's not just Top Gun. These are things that we taught in the training command when I was an instructor there. We would teach Top Gun kind of things to new students. So the training went real deep into our psyche, and we did it a lot. And I wouldn't say I was concerned about any of the Soviet fighters. My dad asked me once who I would not want to fight. The Israelis. They're good because they do it a lot. At least that was how it was back in my day. I hope I'm making some sense to you guys. Let's see. Let's see here. Let me scroll up a little bit. I think I missed a couple. Did you like the slatted F4S version more than the hard wing F4N? Yeah, the slatted F4S was good. It gave you better low speed capability. The low smoke engines were good because they couldn't see it at a distance like they could with the F4N and J. Although in the N and the J, we would put one engine in at idle and one engine at min afterburner, and that would make the smoke go away. We'd actually lay down smoke at about 25 miles, so they would eyeball that, and then you go to no smoke, idle and min burner, and then turn away from that, and then you could actually get a little bit of an advantage by doing that. What are your views on the F-16? I think I answered that. How confident were you going on Soviet types? I've never seen an SR-71 in the air. Never, ever, except on video. For whatever reason, I just never had. Just how restrictive was the forward view out of the windscreen compared to the F-14? I think that is a reference to the F-4. The F-14 had good visibility and big canopy. The F-4, there was a kind of a blind spot at your 7 o'clock and 5 o'clock because there was a canopy bow there between the two cockpits. The F-14 had much better visibility. Let's see. During ACM, what were the key strengths of the F-14 you'd like to use the most? The vertical capabilities, high to low, tight turning fights, or slow speed, high angle attack? Well, slow speed, high angle attack in the F-14A was kind of sketchy because of the engines. I presume the Ds were superb. I really would have liked to have flown the D, but never got a chance to. What were the key strengths of the F-14 you like to use the most? Certainly the gun. It was nice to have a gun, have that option. The radar and the crew combination, the guy in the back and the radar were a powerful, powerful weapon system. So generally speaking, if the ROE was right, you wouldn't need to get into a dogfight because he'd be dead long before you got to the merge. But if you get into a turning fight, it turns well. It does a good job at slow speed. You got a lot of power, and you could turn a slow speed fight into a fast bug out if you needed to. So it was a very capable airplane. Northern Nightmare. Do you have a favorite F-4 or F-14, or is that too hard to answer? No, I don't have a favorite specific airplane in terms of the ones that I flew. You flew all the airplanes you had in the squadron, and I was just reading a book called MiG Killers of Yankee Station, and looking at that, I compared some of the bureau numbers with the fights that took place in anywhere between 1963 and 73 is when it ended. I've got a lot. I've got a lot of those bureau numbers in my logbook. So I've actually flown several MiG killers, but I didn't get to kill any MiGs. Any reconnaissance? Wait, what happened? Where'd it go? Oh, something happened. Hold on one second. I'll get to you. Where'd it go? Oh, any reconnaissance missions, higher low level F-4, F-14? I actually did find a camera pod when I was on the Coral Sea and put it on our airplane and took some pictures, and they turned out pretty well. I was a TARPS qualified pilot in the F-14. That was actually my last flight in the F-14, was a TARPS flight. I have had an engine failure on catapult with the TARPS pod on, which is a frightening experience because you got roughly 2,000 pounds of TARPS pod that you can't get rid of if you need to, but that all went okay. So yeah, I've flown some reconnaissance missions. I flew some in the Ernest Will days, back when we were escorting tankers through the Straits of Hormuz. I flew some TARPS missions on that. Let's see. Talked about the F-4 slats. Was the sheer size of the F-14 a hindrance? Well, it wasn't a hindrance. It's something that, you were the center of the flight. It was a big airplane in plan form. You could see it for miles. So I wouldn't say it was a hindrance because its size gave you the capabilities that you needed to fight against that. So it was good. Let's see. What was the F-8? Better ACM F-4. Talked about that. I've heard from a former Air Force pilot. This is Blackbird's. That the refuelers, the guys on the aircraft carriers who wore the purple jackets, had a bad habit of doodling around and taking too long to refuel. Was that true? The grapes were never a problem for me. The fighters drink a lot of gas, and they were always there for me, and they filled me up whenever I needed it. I did not ever shoot a Phoenix. Sebastian asked me if I had shot one. I did not ever get to fire a Phoenix. MiG-25 Foxbat. Any encounters of the close kind? What's your opinion on F-14 versus MiG-25? I never did fight the MiG-25. It would be an interesting fight. That's all I could say about that. Blackbird, what's your opinion of the handling of F-35 Lightning project? Well, I actually know some people that worked on the F-35 project, and they like the airplane. My only opinion is it's a single engine airplane, and I think that's a mistake, but that's just me. Kurt Schreiber. Whoops, where'd that go? 4-year F-14 test pilot. Oh. So the F-14 during testing showed little degradation performance with missiles near the center line. How was your experience with it? The airplane flew well with our normal loadout, which we had the Jesus, what do we carry? Normal, one or two Phoenix in the wells, and usually two Sparrows, two Winders, and 600 rounds of HE, of 20 millimeter HE, and yeah, it flew fine. We also had tanks on there too, so we had some external fuel as well. So we had long legs. We could stay up for a long time, and it fought well with all that stuff on it. I don't know that I've ever flown a clean F-14. How did the F-14 do against the F-15 in ACM? If you fought your fight, you were good. You had a longer missile range than the F-15 had, so you could reach out and touch him a lot sooner than he could touch you. In a turning fight, F-15's it's a good airplane in a turning fight, and you wouldn't necessarily, at least in the F-14A, want to get caught there. Let's see, from Martin. Do you think the F-4 would have been even better had it also had a swing wing from inception, like initial mod F-14 concepts? Geez, wow, that hadn't even thought of that, but the F-4 was built to do a certain thing, and it did that pretty well. Did you ever fly the F-111 in your F-4 days? I did not. I understand that was something of a challenge in that it was somewhat underpowered considering its weight, but I don't really know. I've never even fought against an F-111. From the 88 Tench. How would you use the paved spike pod for an LGB attack with the Phantom? Never had the paved spike. I don't even know what that is. I've read about Buccaneers pulling crazy maneuvers using them to keep the laser on. Did the F-4 require the same? I have no idea. I never flew with the laser system. Do you have an opinion on the F-18? Do you like it? The F-18 is a neat airplane. I tried to cross deck to it was a Kitty Hawk and go from F-4s straight into F-18s. I would have loved to have flown that airplane. Scariest and best moment in the F-14. Scariest moment is probably the engine failure on Catapult. Literally lost the engine at the end of the Catapult strike launch, which was interesting. The best moment in the F-14. Best moment in the F-14. I'm going to have to go with my first flight in it. I mean, it was a fun airplane to fly. I was flying a modern fighter, and it was cool. Let's see. Sturla Johansson. How does maneuvering the F-14 differ from other aircraft? Lots of rudder? Not a whole lot of rudder. The F-4, we use the rudder on some maneuvers to get a quick turn, called the rudder reversal at the top of an arc. Not an arc, a vertical climb, do a rudder reversal, get you coming straight back down real quick. The F-14, not a whole lot of rudder. Use the rudder a little bit when you're strafing / air-to-air gunnery, just to move the gun around a little bit. But otherwise, it's fairly honest airplane. You pull the stick to where you want to go, and it goes there. Tough question. If you were going into a fight for survival with only one coming out alive from the fight, and you could only pick one fighter, which one would you choose? Ooh, that is a tough question. Nowadays, I'd probably go with the F-18. Yeah, I think, yeah, if I had to choose, I'd probably go F-18 at this point. Wait, check that. F-22. If I could take any airplane, I'd probably go F-22. Any landing fails or close calls? Yes, of course. Landings are tough, especially on the ship, especially at night. I have had a taxi one wire in the Phantom. Scared the shit out of my backseater and me. Horrible weather. I mean, there's some interesting things that I've done at night in F4s and F-14s that I don't care to duplicate. Let's see. From Jake, did you ever find yourself in a single engine situation in the F-14? Was it possible to bring back board ship single? Yeah, like I said, I did have an engine failure off the catapult. That actually, as it turned out, was my fault. I had to switch in the wrong position. I did not bring it back single engine. I actually got it relit, but they had me pull it back to idle. So I did a simulated single engine, and it was a fine pass. It did a good job. Let's see. Northern Nightmare. Are there any warbirds you would like or would want to fly if possible? Yeah, almost all of them. I mean, I fly out of Chino a lot, and Chino has a whole bunch of warbirds there. And every time you go out there, there's a cool airplane flying around, and all of them would be fun. But I'm not a tail dragger guy, so I probably would be horribly embarrassed at my ability to land and take off. Let's see. Did you know there is an amazing F-14 sim that recently came out? I've heard about the F-14 DCS simulator. I don't like those kind of things, but I understand it's pretty good. Let's see. Someone from Subic Bay, Zigzag Ground Zero. Volcanic eruption of 91. Were you around on that? I was around. I wasn't in the Philippines at the time. I understand it kind of destroyed Clark Air Force Base, and I spent a lot of time at Clark Air Force Base as well as at QB Point, but I was not in the Philippines at that time. How did you like night carrier landings? I made it through over 100 of them, and if I was asked to do one right now, I would probably find a reason to get a root canal. What would be the best and worst aspect of aging if you're still an active pilot? The best thing about getting old as a pilot is you're getting old. The option is not so good. The worst aspect of aging is you're getting old, and your eyesight goes, your night vision goes, your hearing goes. It's frustrating. Let's see. Any good banter you can share between you and the F-18 guys? The F-18 guys, they're all good guys. I have a nephew that's flying the F-18 right now. F-18G. He's a Growler pilot. But no, nothing. It was interesting when the F-18 came out. We did some of the Optival VF-154 because our skipper was a former test pilot, and I guess he had some ends at VX4. I think he was actually skipper of VX4 at one point. So we got to play in that, and it was fun. What was the worst sea state winds coming aboard at night? Worst I ever saw was the night of my that I flew in was the night of my taxi one wire. The wind went from about 35 knots wind over the deck to 70 knots wind over the deck in that short a period of time, and I had made a power correction, and my next power correction was full burner and set an attitude, and I landed. I wasn't intending to land, so that was the worst. I've seen really bad stuff. I was on the flight deck. I was paddles on a pitching deck night occasion, and our sister squadron VF-21 on the Coral Sea. Their skipper came aboard. He did everything he could do that was right, but the deck was coming up, he was coming down, and literally put the landing gear up through the wings. When he landed, the airplane didn't go into fire or anything like that, but he landed and stopped, and it was literally 2 feet shorter because the landing gear, main gear, had literally separated at the joint and gone up through the top of the wing. So that was bad stuff. Let's see, from Martin. Do you think the F-18 was a Kirk choice as the eventual Tomcat replacement? I don't know that it was the correct choice. It was basically the only choice. I mean, it doesn't have the legs that the F-14 had. It doesn't have the weapon system that the F-14 had. The F-14 was, I guess, expensive to maintain, although I know Bio has said it wasn't as expensive as some people said it was. And I believe all those stories, but that's a political decision. That's not a fighter pilot thing. We can't control that. Let's see. Hornet has done its job well. I agree. With the improvements of automation and injection molding, do you think the USF, AF, and USN will return to public pursuit of sweep wing designs? I don't know. I don't know if we'll see any more variable incidence wings in the future or not. Let's see. This is it. My grandpa worked on NATO F-4 when they landed at Partake and F-104, F-86, F-5. Well, very interesting. Stephen, would you have liked to have had? Would I have liked to have gone to Top Gun? I'm the only guy you'll ever meet that turned down a Top Gun class. My first Top Gun nomination, the F-4s we were flying had wing cracks, so I could have gone to the ground school, but that really wouldn't counted for anything, and it would have just taken me out of the squadron and taken me off the flight schedule. So when I look back on it, if I could have gone to Top Gun, I would have liked that. The F-4, when I was in F-14s, I was nominated to go to Top Gun, but I was a department head. I was a lieutenant commander, and it was kind of frowned upon at Miramar if you sent a lieutenant commander to Top Gun, because that's basically saying that your JOs weren't worthy of it. And I didn't want that to be on any of my JOs, so I nominated a couple other guys to go instead of me. So I'm the only guy you'll ever meet that has said no to Top Gun. Let's see. Chuck Meister, did you ever do one of those crazy low flybys where your mates below were recording that might have gotten you in trouble? No, I've done some crazy low flybys, but nobody I know was filming them. The lowest was probably against a Russian trawler, basically a recon boat, intel ship that was out by our boat, and I went by there at not flight deck level, but their deck level, so I was probably about 25 feet off the ground, off this ocean, and just over supersonic, just enough to give them a boom. Let's see. Bio said an instructor got pissed off at an F-18 pilot that kicked his ass in ACM to teach a lesson when he kept making fun of the F-14. Any such friendly rival you had seen? Yeah, there's always some of that. When I was doing the Oppaval with VX5, I was flying F-4Ns in VF-154, and they had told us that they wanted to get some look down, shoot down, multi-airplane engagements and things like that. And we did some crazy things that got us kills on the F-18s in our first engagement, and then we played it straight up after that. And those guys were a little bit angry at the gimmicks that we used. Basically, I sacrificed myself. Like I said, the F-4N smoked a lot. So as we're running in, the other 3 airplanes were in min, afterburner, and idle, and they took a big wide separation, maybe almost 10 miles apart, which tactically you wouldn't normally do. We all had good radars, and I went straight down the throat head on all 4 of those guys. They were in some sort of tactical wing kind of thing, and maybe a mile and a half separation. And I just went straight down the middle in full power, so putting out as much smoke as possible. And just prior to the merge, I just pulled up. They rolled in underneath me. I got shot to pieces. I was dead immediately, but the other three guys rolled in on those guys and took good heart of the envelope shots aft quarter on all the F-18s. They were a little bit angry with that, but if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Let's see. Have you ever experienced any rare weather other than in landing situations? No. Normally you get above the weather. There have been times where I've been in bad weather at 35,000 feet. That's not fun. Got a little bit of icing, not much though. I did fly through a water spout once, which was stupid. We used to go try to find rainstorms just to clean off the airplane. We put the gear down and flaps down and fly through and just get it wet with fresh water just to wash the airplane off. And it was nice because then you could see out of the windscreen when you came back to the ship. But nothing really weird. I've flown in snow, which is a little bit disorienting at night if your lights are on. So a couple times I flew in snow, I turned the lights off. Otherwise, it was very disorienting. Have you ever been intercepted by surprise by friend or foe? Not by surprise. I had to intercept off the Ranger when I was flying F-14s against a MiG-23, a Flogger K, came out of Cameron Bay. I wasn't surprised. We knew he was coming. That's why I actually launched. And we did a few turns, and he ran out of gas and went back to Cameron Bay, but nothing really happened about it. Nothing, no big deal. I mean, no one fired anything. You think future pilots, this is Blackbird's Wrath. Do you think future pilots will be able to keep up with the advancing technology that's integrated into new aircraft, or do you worry they'll struggle? That's a good point. Like I said, I read this thing called MiG Killers of Yankee Station, and I think it was. Trying to think of the guy's name. Anyway, one of the pilots said, "Hey, the F-4 was good because it had two guys because you can't keep up with everything. You can't do the radar stuff and do fighter pilot stuff all at the same time. Even back then, guys were having trouble with all the stuff. I understand there's a lot of things that have been simplified in the F-18 and other glass cockpit airplanes that make the weapons system more manageable for a single pilot. But yeah, I think guys will be overwhelmed by some of the stuff. There's a whole lot of input that's coming in, from outside that you need to pay attention to. And a lot of the things that I read about Vietnam is there were a whole lot of missed calls that people just didn't hear because they were overtasked, even back then. But there's a designer somewhere that can figure that out. Designed obsolescence. Read what the designers say. Okay. TJW 2005 1234. Can you explain what the camera and IRST allowed the F-14 to do? How useful was it? Why do some early F-14s, like the Iranian version, have small chin pods? You know what? I'm not really sure. We had the IRST. I used it a little bit. You could get a tally-ho. You could get an identification of an airplane at a long distance if you locked it on. So that it was helpful for that. I didn't use it. I never got to drop bombs in the Tomcat. That was after my time, so I didn't use it for any targeting or anything like that. Let's see, from Karen Shortland. Do you have any aircraft on a wish list that you would love to fly but haven't had the chance to? Yeah, almost all of them. I mean, there's a whole bunch. I've flown probably 25 or 30 different airplanes, different types of airplanes. I'd like to fly 25 or 30 more. but gray hair, bad eyes, bad hearing, not going to get that chance. Paracelsus, they won't talk about IRST publicly, but it's a tactical thing. Daylight, no emissions, read the guy. Okay. The 8 tench. What's your thoughts on the new USAF advanced trainer? I think it's called the Red Hawk. I don't really know anything about the new trainers. I know they've had some trouble with getting the acquisition strategy right, but I don't really know anything about the airplanes. Longest single flight / mission. I think the longest flight that I had was actually with Bio. I think it was a missile shoot off of somewhere near Hawaii, and I think all total it was the time in the cockpit was I want to say it was close to 5 hours or something like that, but I don't really remember. A lot of the time was just sitting on deck waiting for things to happen. And I know we launched once, then we came back and landed, sat on the deck for a while, refueled, de-armed and rearmed, then took off again and did the missile shoot. So that was a long flight. I think that's the longest one. Let's see. Blackbird's Wrath. Do you think there will ever be large-scale dogfights again in the future? I don't want to be one of those guys that say the days of dogfighting are over. Mark my words. As long as there's people flying airplanes that can shoot other airplanes down, there will be dogfights. Let's see. What has been your favorite non-military aircraft to fly? Non-military aircraft. I flew a Cessna 337 that was very highly modified. It had, instead of 180 horsepower, it had 280 horsepower engines, which is stock on those. It had 2 IO 550s, which I think are 330 horsepower, one in the front and one in the back. That was an amazing airplane to fly. But it had a big camera on the side, so it didn't really go as fast as you might think. But that was fun to fly. And right now I'm flying a Grumman Tiger for sky typers, and that's a fun airplane to fly. It's very forgiving, and it's a fun airplane to fly. So there's that. I have flown a Cirrus, and that was also a fun airplane to fly. Of course, I've got my time in various Pipers and Cessnas. I prefer the low wing airplane to a high wing airplane, but Cessnas are an honest airplane. I did my commercial in a 182, and it was a fun airplane to fly as well. So there's that. Let's see. And I don't have any jet non-military time. I was hoping to get a job flying a Learjet, but that just didn't work out. Let's see. Did you have a chance to go on A7 or A6s or A7s? I actually wanted to fly A6s, but the Navy thought better of that and put me in F-4s. I like their mission. The A7s, I flew in the simulator quite a bit. It seemed like a good airplane to fly. It had TF-30s too, but they weren't quite as bad as they were on the F-14. And don't take that the wrong way. But I guess I had a chance. I just didn't go that way. Is it true F-14s? This is a KLRGT 500KR. Is it true F-14s behavior differently at 300 knots versus Mach 0.7, 0.8 wing sweep because of the engine producing more thrust due to the big engine intake ram effect and low rate with sweep? I didn't really notice anything. The wing sweep was the wing sweep. It did what it had to do, and it worked really well. It didn't change your trim settings. It didn't really make a difference. You almost, yeah. I don't recall it being something interesting as a pilot. It just worked. What's your recollection of the way you flew at slower speeds versus high speeds? Also, did you ever use higher speed roll rate with wings swept back versus slower speed tight turning in ACM? No, like I said, sometimes you would play with the wing sweep manually to make it look like you were going fast when you weren't. Otherwise, it was a good airplane. It flew well. Did you ever have to fire any serious warning shots in an intercept? Nope, I have never fired in anger or protection. It's just everywhere I went, peace broke out. So I'm happy with that. Blackbird Red. Was there a sort of mission you took once and were happy with never having to partake in again? That's a good question. I once flew an airplane with gear down from Fallon to Miramar. I'd never want to do that ever again because it took a long time and it was uncomfortable. And we didn't have a tanker, so it ate a lot of gas and we landed min fuel. I don't want to do that again. How did the call sign Hooter come about? That's a good question. My standard answer is I gave a briefing and used the phrase, if you're going to hoot with the owls, you better be able to scream with the eagles. And then I became Hooter. And I'm going to stick with that. Ever fancied helicopters? I did actually think about helicopters. I flew one once. That convinced me that I didn't want to do it. It felt like I was trying to play the drums while riding a unicycle and juggling flaming chainsaws. You're busy when you fly a helicopter. Although I've got a lot of friends that fly helicopters and they love it. So my own personal opinion is I don't love them, but other people do. Flying over the Pacific Ocean, etc. This is Zigzag Ground Zero. Flying over the Pacific Ocean, etc. Did you ever think about World War II Navy carrier pilots and missions at sea? Close calls of having to bail out or eject. I never got to a point while I was flying where I seriously thought about ejecting, where it was an option. I mean, there's always, the instance that if something happens to the airplane and you have to eject, you eject. That never happened to me. I have the same number of landings as I have takeoffs, so that's good in a logbook. When we were flying in the Northern Pacific and the water was, I don't know, 40 degrees or something, yeah, that was concerning. I didn't want to go into that water, even with the wetsuit or the poopy suit. You weren't going to last very long, so I'm glad I didn't have to jump into that cold water. Let's see. Stephen Wood, I just got my private pilot license. What advice would you give to somebody with just 75 hours under their belt? Well, the best advice I can give anybody, no matter how much hours they have under their belt, is always assume that you don't know everything. That if everything seems to be going great, then you might be missing something. Always be aware of what's going on around you. Keep your situational awareness up. Be aware of where you are, how you got there, how you're going to get out of there, and how you're going to land if something happens. And I think it was Bob Hoover who said, if you know you're going to crash, fly your airplane as deeply into the crash as you can. Just keep flying the airplane. Let's see, I might be paraphrasing that. Let's see. RLL661, hello. When flying TARPS missions, was it a solo F-14 or did you fly with a wingman? Let's see. My TARPS missions were a single F-14. It wasn't solo. I still had a backseater. But the TARPS missions I flew, there were other airplanes airborne, but where I flew, I was by myself. Let's see, Stephen, 197106. why did you not go into the airline after the Navy like most ex-military pilots? And I just never really wanted to do that. Just not something I wanted to do. And then the pay scale split when I was a lieutenant, and I had friends that got out of the Navy and took a huge pay cut to become an airline pilot. And that I think that was a bad move on the part of the airlines to run the pay down so low. I mean, literally, you'd get out of the Navy as a lieutenant, and you'd take a $10,000 a year pay cut to go fly for the airlines until you got to captain. So at the time, it just wasn't a good choice, and I didn't want to do it anyway. Paracelsus, owls are ACM and BFM specialist analysts. That's old jargon, basically Charlie in Top Gun. Fair enough. Joe D. 777. What did you think of the F-4S radar AUG-10? I've heard that it was very good for its day. One of the first would look down, shoot down. Yeah, absolutely. It was a good radar. It was good. I will give you that. Owls, eagles, skunks, phantoms, etc., etc. Except for the crashing bit, hopefully. Let's see. Always look for a place to land at all times. I agree with that. Let's see. This is from Christian Reuter. Would you think it is beneficial for a two-seat crew to always be paired together, or do you think it is better if the pairing changes constantly? Not constantly. I think mission-wise, if you're going into harm's way, I think it's critical for crew to know what each other are thinking, and you can't get that if you're just going with different people all the time. You have to go with different people sometimes, but I think if I'm going into a shooting war, I would want to have a fairly stable relationships between me and my backseater. I see you're back on, Mike.
Yep, so I'm going to ask you to answer the last question you can see there, and then we're going to wrap up Hooter.
Okay, I think this is from Grizz World. Is it true that going into a dogfight in F-14A, you would stay at full burner all the time to avoid compressor stall, or is that a myth? No, you couldn't stay in burner the whole time. You run out of gas too quick. And I don't think that really had anything to do with the compressor stall. Let's see, Stephen, 197-106, do you attend tailhook? I haven't been to tailhook in a long time. Just it never seems to work out time-wise for me to go. Let's see. I'm from Russia. Did you have to intercept bear bombers, and what was your thoughts on us? I never got to intercept a bear. I've seen some bears around the ship, and other guys have. I've intercepted, I think, cubs and mays. I think it's a cub, AN2. And I was vectored on, I think, badgers or bison or something, but I was in the clouds the whole time, and that was kind of scary, but never got to do bears. And what was my thoughts on the Russians? They're capable guys, and that was going to be a hard war if we had to fight it. And I think that's all, Mike.
Brilliant. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you about the models in the background. We have to talk about them. Where did you get them from, and what are they?
Okay. Let's see. You can see me pointing to it. This is the F-14. I had that made in the Philippines. The one behind my head is the F-4. I had that one made in the Philippines. I think that's the one I made for my dad. I think it's got his name on the back canopy. I didn't put it on the front canopy. I put my name on the front canopy.
Of course.
And then on the top of the bookcase, you can see the T2 and the A4 up there. The T2 was actually given to me from, was it Rockwell that made the T2? When I flew the T2, I got it in the mail. Someone sent it to me. I really don't know who sent it to me. And the A4, I think I had that made in the Philippines as well. The three I had made in the Philippines are made out of wood, hand carved, and very, very detailed. I've moved a lot, and there's a lot of battle damage on them if you were to look at them very closely. I think one of the Phoenixes fell off of mine, and the rails fell off that I had on them. And you can see the Dave Parsons book up there, the F-14 book up on top of my bookcase there. A little bit of staging for that.
I think it's a bit of a rare book, that, isn't it? I've never seen that online or anything. I'm struggling to get that one.
Oh, really? I thought that was fairly available.
No, I haven't been able to find it.
I do have a couple of quotes in there. I'm quoted in there a couple of places.
Awesome. Well, Hooter, I want to thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully our viewers have enjoyed your answers. And yeah, hopefully we can get you back on because you're a great guest and a great bloke. So I want to thank you very much.
That was an hour?
That was an hour.
Wow. That went by fast. Well, thanks, Mike. I enjoy doing it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone in the comments for coming in. And yeah, so thanks again, Hooter. And hopefully we can get you on soon. But enjoy your day because I know you're 8 hours ahead, 8 hours behind, sorry. So enjoy your day and speak soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike.